I don't want to start a video.
No.
I'm going to rename myself.
Where's the settings?
Okay, so it's 6:30 and we could probably get started. I'll just continue to let folks in. And just as a friendly reminder for everyone to please mute themselves throughout and any questions in the chat room. But I'm gonna leave it to you, Peggy.
And then you'll mute everybody at the.
Yeah.
So I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Everybody can hear and see me?
Yes.
I can't hear and see me.
Um,
Welcome, everybody, to North Fork Audubon Society. We're a local chapter, for those of you who don't know, of National Audubon. That's how National Audubon works. We all are local chapters, and therefore we rely on local funding. So you are all welcome to donate. You can go on our website, northforkaudubon.org, and donate button there. We would appreciate that. And also, if you would like to be added to our email list for future programs, you can email us at info@northforkaudubon.org. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Brian. So Brian Rusnica, he's coming to us from Cambridge, Massachusetts tonight, which is one of the great things about Zoom. And he's originally from upstate New York. He's president of the Eastern Massachusetts Hawk Watch. He's been on the board for several years there. And he also is an observer for the Plum Island Spring Hawk Watch site, which I didn't know there was one until I read about this. And he also is a wildlife photographer and graphic designer. He specializes, of course, in birds of prey. So Brian, thank you. And I'm going to hand it over to you. Oh, and by the way, I should add, if any of you have questions, of course, just please add them to the chat screen, and we will have a Q&A after Brian's presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Peggy. And thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me. Thanks to all of you for showing up for this discussion. I'm going to be talking about winter raptor ID, and I'm just going to dive right in. We've got quite a lot of information to cover. So what I'm going to do tonight is really give an overview of all the birds of prey that you might see in the northeastern U.S. during winter. And I'm going to make sure that these slides are available for folks after the presentation so that you can kind of review all the content at your own speed. And then there's some bonus slides at the end that I don't think we'll have time to talk about, but those will be, hopefully useful to you as a birder. I like to start all of my programs talking about birding ethics. And I think the American Birding Association really sets a great standard for birding ethics. And there's some just very simple rules. Number one is respect and promote birds in their environment. When we're talking about raptors, they're very susceptible to certain things that folks do that are problematic. Disturbing nests, baiting, intentional flushing, flash photography for owls. These are the types of things that we want to, not participate in order to respect birds and their environment. Limiting human impact in any way when we're observing or photographing raptors is incredibly important. And I think that the ABA sets a great standard here. I've got a link to the full code of ethics for you to review. And they've updated it pretty recently, so always good to refresh yourself. couple other standards there: respect and promote the birding community and its individual members, pretty common sense. And again, respect and promote the law and the rights of others. I like to think of myself as a birder ambassador anytime I'm out in the field. And I also want to seek ethical guides and ethical organizations that follow these principles. We call out unethical behavior and continue to learn. Ethics is a lifelong process, and we should never assume that we know it all. Some goals for this workshop today: I want to talk about why winter is so great for observing raptors and the very absolute minimum basics about migration. Also, just introducing how to identify raptors and the technique. I'll talk about the species that we'll see in this area: 12 diurnal raptors, 4 owls, and then some rarities. And then for tomorrow, what I want to do again is give you some places to go next if this piques your interest in terms of media for Raptor ID and organizations to join or follow, and again some bonus slides at the end. About me, thank you for the Peggy for the introduction. I'll just add that all the things that I do related to birds are volunteer positions. I don't get paid, and I think that that's something that I want to just underscore, because everybody here can get involved with a local organization, and you can make birds a part of your life and their conservation a part of your life. And I think that all of these grassroots organizations like North Fork Audubon Society really run on that volunteer spirit. There's a couple links here to my different projects if you get a chance to review them. I also want to call out the Raptor ID Facebook group. That's a 14,000 person group, and every day we practice Raptor ID. So we get species from all over the country, and it's a great way to brush up. Okay, let's talk about why winter and why we're here and what's great about winter birding for raptors. The basics of migration are that birds move due to resource availability. They follow food availability, and then they follow nesting location availability. And these migrations happen twice a year in this area, once in the fall, once in the spring. And that migration connects these birds and connects their wintering grounds with their breeding grounds. For some species, those are two drastically different locations, or for some species, they don't migrate at all. A couple terms that you might hear me use tonight are permanent resident versus migrant. So a permanent resident, again, a bird that we could find in Suffolk County any day of the year. A migrant might be a bird that we only see in the winter. We also have short distance versus long distance migrants. Short distance could just go down to Virginia for the winter. Long distance birds of prey might go to South America. And total versus partial migrant. Total migrants means the entire population of that bird is gone for the season, and partial means that some of them come and some of them go. Okay, why winter for observing raptors? For the birds themselves, migration offers improved food opportunities and also an expansion of the territorial range when these birds aren't breeding. So you'll get to observe different behaviors. And for birds that breed north of us, it's just going to be easier to collect and secure food than it will be in a snowy, barren landscape. So those are the reasons why birds of prey come here. For us, the benefits are that we get to see these different migrant species, and for some birds, we get to see just larger quantities of them. Bald eagle jumps to my mind when I think about this, that we just see a lot more eagles that come down, even though we might be able to see them all year round in Long Island. Birds of prey are generally less secretive and less sensitive compared to nesting season. We can see them better without foliage blocking our views, and snow cover is also great for identifying birds, and it provides just great light for photography. All right, here's a real quick crash course in identification technique. What we want to do as observers for Raptor ID is use a combination of field marks. That includes the shape, the flight style, and the plumage of a bird. The best identifications, when we can be the most sure, are when we can combine different field marks to lock down that ID. The best advice I've ever received about Raptor ID is to learn the basics well. And that's what I'm going to talk tonight about. you know, there's a lot of information out there that I would consider minutia, and you can learn that later, and you can always brush up on that when you have time. But learning the basics well will never fail you, because most of these small details cannot be seen in the field. They cannot be seen without a great close photograph, but the basics of raptor identification will always serve you well. A couple disclaimers about Raptor ID. Think like students, not like experts. I do not like to use the word expert, definitely not about myself. As I said, I don't have a formal biological background, no formal education in birds of prey. I'm just a student, observing birds in the environment and reading up on the published literature. So there's always something new to learn, and I love thinking like a student. Also, no one can identify every bird, but it is fun to try. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes a photo or a view is just not going to be good enough. For every rule I'm going to talk about tonight, literally every single one of them, there will be an exception. So it's best for us to think typically, usually, or often, as opposed to always or never with raptors. Every time we think we've got something in the Raptor IT group, we'll see a bird that blows our minds and breaks that rule. And finally, birds have wings. You may think that the expected range is something that's very useful in terms of identifying a bird, but just remember that birds have wings and they don't observe borders, and that vagrant sightings happen all the time. When we're talking about Raptor ID, it's really a process of elimination in many ways. So I wanted to show these silhouettes here to get folks to start thinking about the different buckets that raptors kind of fall in. And if we can eliminate some options, and if we can put a subject bird into one of these buckets, that can help us really hone in on the ID, and we don't have to waste time thinking about 20 different species. I just want to call out some key features of these buckets, and these are not the only ones, but the accipiters are a group of hawks that are known for their long tails. So just observe the length of this tail compared to some of the other proportions. The falcons are well known for their pointed wing shape. So that's something that really stands out on a bird like this. The buteos are broad and long-winged hawks, and they have shorter tails. So that's something that jumps out compared to the proportions of the accipiter. Vultures, another extremely large bird. Notice its really small head. And this two-dimensional silhouette doesn't really show the dihedral V shape of a turkey vulture, which is a really key field mark we'll talk about later. And then the eagles. The eagle has this huge, almost plank-like shape, very flat, broad, long wings, and a really big head and large bill compared to others. So if we can start thinking about these buckets, put a bird into a bucket and then eliminate from there, that's going to be a great way to build up an ID. All right, so now I'm going to dive into the species. We'll start with the diurnal raptors, and just to show you kind of, how to think about identification, it's always great to know who your suspects might be. So this is some data from eBird. eBird has these great bar charts, which just talk about the population of the birds and their frequency. So this chart here is separated between the hawks, the falcons, and the owls. And this is Suffolk County, New York, which covers most of Long Island, if you're not familiar with the geography. In December, January, and February, it just shows how frequently these birds are seen. So the bar chart shows that red-tailed hawks, northern harriers are really frequently seen birds, but a golden eagle, in fact, is extremely rare. For the falcons, peregrine falcons and merlin are regulars. Gyrfalcon sometimes show up here. It's actually a pretty surprising frequency for gyrfalcon, but pretty rare in comparison. And then with the owls, this is something I found fascinating. Barred owl, which is a bird in my area that's incredibly common, is almost unheard of in this county. So that's just something to think about. The differences in habitat and environment aren't always obvious. Snowy owls, on the other hand, seem to be really well seen. So eBird has great data like this to help you identify what you might expect. We'll start with the buteos. These hawks have long, broad wings and short tails. The red-tailed hawk is where I like to start because this is the bird that most people are familiar with. They're extremely common all across North America. They're very, prominent birds. You probably have seen one soaring around, the bright red tail. It's a large buteo. The key field marks on red-tailed hawks are the dark belly band of feathers. These are seen on almost all eastern birds, and then the dark patagial marks up here on the leading edge of the wings. Those field marks are present on most of our red tails. It's a year-round resident in this area. The adult red tail has the brick orange top of the tail. You can just barely see in this picture. And they usually have dark eyes. They start yellow as juvenile and they get darker as they age. This bird has kind of some golden eyes. Again, I'm not going to be able to talk about all the field marks I've listed on all these slides tonight, but they are here for you to review and hopefully give you an overview as you come back to these slides to build up your knowledge about these raptors. And again, these are the basics. And if we can learn the basics well, we're going to be building a good foundation. Here's your first lesson about raptor ID. Probably the most common question a raptor person like myself gets asked by the average person is, I saw a bird that looked like a red-tailed hawk, but the tail wasn't red. This is the juvenile red-tailed hawk, which does not have a red tail, but it does have the other field marks we talked about: the dark belly band of feathers, the patagial bars up here, the long wing shape, the short tail. The red-tailed juvenile for that first year has many thin dark brown bands and a brown tail. So that is really explains a lot of that very basic question. So if you keep in mind that most juvenile red-tailed hawks don't have a red tail, that's going to help you just understand that bird and understand that different ages and different species have different marks. Different sexes, as we'll see tonight, also have different plumage. Red tails are identical. From a distance, we can see this red-tailed hawk. Again, from below the tail, the red tail looks maybe pinkish or orangish if the light is right, but we can see the belly band, we can see the dark patagial bars, again, long, broad wings. And this is what we typically see, when we're driving down the highway. This is the bird up in the air. So that's what they look like from a distance. Just some bonus information. Here, again, juvenile red-tailed hawk. Notice the tail, light brown with the dark brown thin bands. Red tails generally hunt mammals, but they also take plenty of birds, and they're a generalist. So I've seen them go after toads, earthworms, all sorts of good stuff. Interesting conservation fact that red tails are susceptible to rat poisons. So when they prey on rats, those poisons may build up in their body and eventually kill them. Red-shouldered hawk, another bird that's in the buteo group. It's a medium-sized buteo. Pale crescent marks on the outer wings, I'm highlighting here, are a good field mark at any age. It's a widespread bird in the eastern part of the US. And we also see them in the California and the West Coast. It's a year-round resident, a little bit less likely to be seen in the winter because some of them do migrate out of the Northeast. The adult is this bird with a rufous barred breast. Barring, when I use it for raptors, I mean horizontal marks that kind of go across the body versus streaks, which are vertical marks that go up and down. Black and white on the tail, a black tail with thin white bands. And then you can see some black and white banding on the flight feathers. And then in this photo, you see it actually does have a red shoulder on this top leading edge of the wing. Sometimes that's tough to see, but it is there. As a juvenile, the red-shouldered hawk, again, here's the pale crescents I mentioned in the edge of the wings. Underneath it has dark streaks on a pale belly, and the tail generally has a dark tail with thin white bands. From a distance, again, here's the pale crescents. These can be seen from quite a ways away, which is a great way to ID your red-shouldered hawk. It looks a lot like a red tail in terms of the shape. Some more info here about how they fly. Flat wings, steady circles. The wings are pushed forward and a little bit blunt at the tips. And here's another juvenile. Again, the pale crescents can be seen on the wings here. Conservation fact, red-shouldered hawks are moving northward. They're much more common in the south, but as climate change warms up the Northeast, we're more likely to see these birds year-round. They eat reptiles and amphibians as well as small mammals, and again, generalists. All right, here's our first winter migrant in the buteo group. This is the rough-legged hawk. This is a large buteo, effectively the same size as a red-tailed hawk. A couple key differences: it has feathered legs, which you can't always see, but it comes in light and dark morphs. The rough-legged hawk breeds in the Arctic, and it comes down to spend the winter with us. We see them throughout much of the US. They also can be found in Eurasia. Here's the light morph. This is generally a pale bird, white overall. It has the key field mark is this dark carpal patch on the upper area of the wrists of the wing. It has one on each side. And then also they typically have a dark belly, but that can be a variable field mark depending on the age and the sex of a light morph roughleg. And they also come in a dark morph, which is the only all dark buteo in the East, typically. So this bird is all this chocolate brown. They can be even blackish underneath. As a juvenile, they have yellow eyes, and they turn darker brown as an adult. From a distance, again, here are those dark carpal patches and the dark belly. So something to keep in mind is that when we're looking at our light morph rough-legged, and the light morph are more common, to look for these big dark spots in the dark belly. These birds frequently hover over the ground to search for prey, so that's something that also is a giveaway. So look for these field marks for the roughleg. Open grasslands, these are specialists that really only eat small mammals, but also may scavenge carrion. Conservation fact here that roughleggeds may not need to come to the northeastern U.S. in the future if climate change continues. The areas where they were, were too inhospitable in the winter may become more temperate. So we may not see these birds forever. So those are the three buteos of the winter. We're going to talk about some accipiters. Accipiters are hawks with long tails and short wings. So when we look at the perched accipiter here, we can see the tail is very long and the wing tip only comes to here. So we can see there's a big difference in that distance, which explains, the long-tailed bird versus a short-tailed bird like a buteo. I want to talk about the sharp-shin hawk. The sharp-shin is a smaller accipiter, small round head, again, the long tail. The tail can look squared off from a distance, and this is not the greatest example of square tail, but that is the field mark I want you to think about. It's a widespread bird in North and South America, year-round resident up here, but we're less likely to see them in the winter because so many migrate. The adult sharp-shin hawk has a grayish blue top. They can have orange or red eyes. And if you see an adult, you want to look for the head to be hooded, a dark cap and a dark nape or back of the neck. Juvenile sharp-shin hawk below has streaks. So again, not the easiest to see here, but those streaks are slightly reddish or rufous. The eyes are yellow, and again, long tail, you can kind of see here. From a distance, a little bit better look at the square shape of the tail tip. It's a buoyant bird in flight, which means it just gets lift very easily. And accipiters are known for their flap, flap, glide pattern. So when you think about that, that means flap, flap, and then glide, flap, flap, glide. For sharp-shin hawks, their flapping is very rapid. So we're talking about that kind of flap and then a glide. And basically, if those wing beats are too quick to count, that's a great field mark for flight. So keep an eye on that. If you can count the wing beats, that may be a different bird, which we'll talk about momentarily. Sharp-shin hawks breed in the forest. They typically pursue their prey, which are small birds. And again, another bird here that the edge of their breeding range is right about where we are at. So changes in the future to our environment could change that range. Definitely a bird that struggles from deforestation in this area. Okay, so the other accipiter that I want to talk about is the Cooper's hawk, a medium-shaped bird. It has a larger head compared to the sharp-shin hawk. It has a more rounded tail tip compared to the sharp-shin. The torso is more tubular, and those are the key kind of differences. There's some bonus slides at the end of this presentation to really help you get into the difference between Cooper's hawks and sharp-shin hawks. They're incredibly similar, and I hope those slides will be helpful. It's a year-round resident in the Northeast, widespread in the US and Mexico. The adult coop has rufous barring on the breast, pretty well seen here. Again, the horizontal marks. The eyes are orange or red. The top, can't see the top here, but it's a blue-gray, typically. And if you see the head of the Cooper's hawk, it's a dark cap with a pale nape. That means they're going to look capped, whereas the adult sharp-shinned hawk will look hooded. So these are some field marks in the bonus slides that will become more apparent. The juvenile Cooper's hawk below has dark streaks. They're teardrop shaped. Again, sort of the roundish tail tip here, a flat leading edge of the wing. Sexes are identical. The eyes of the juvenile Cooper's hawk are yellow. These are the guys that you're probably seeing in your backyard at the bird feeder. Again, in flight, here's the rounded tail tip, really well seen here. The flat leading edge, a large head. The torso is tubular. These are the key field marks. And then the flight, again, flat, flat glide. But if you can count the wing beats, flat, flat, flat glide, that's 3 flaps, 3 countable. That less frenetic pace, that's a good field mark for the Cooper's hawk. Again, some bonus information here. They typically breed in the forest, but are doing well in urban and suburban areas like parks, cemeteries. They pursue their prey, small to medium-sized birds and small mammals. And back in earlier last century, these birds were shot because they were thought to be a threat to livestock or game birds. But fortunately, we've kind of cut that out, and the populations have rebounded. All right, we're going to talk about 3 types of falcons here. Falcons are raptors with narrow pointed wings. The first one I want to hit is the American kestrel. This is a small falcon, very colorful bird, boldly marked face. So check out this face with the 2 black marks, one under the eye and one kind of in the sideburn area. And there's different plumages for the 2 sexes of American kestrels. This is the female, and we'll walk through those differences in a moment. Widespread in North and South America and a year-round resident, but much less likely to be seen in winter. A lot of kestrels migrate south. The female American kestrel can be identified on the top by their wing color, which is orange with black barring. And underneath they have a rufous streaking. The tail, which is not seen well in this picture, is orange with many thin black bands. The male American kestrel has a much different look on top. It has blue upper wings, and then below also different. Typically, we see them with dark spots on their kind of pale to buffy torso. At a distance, we can just generally see this underside of this female has rufous streaking, so that's a great field mark. In the tail, again, lots of thin dark bands. They frequently hover when hunting, and quick flickering wing beats are a key there. And then the male from a distance, I can see, if I can catch the top of the wing, I can see that blue, which is definitely unique. Again, the pointed wings for a falcon. Some conservation facts: habitat loss is a huge problem for kestrels as we develop grasslands and open spaces, as we cut down trees that have nesting cavities, as European starlings continue to multiply. All these are factors in kestrel reproduction. So that's something that we are keeping an eye on. They typically hunt small mammals, small birds, and they also eat insects like this female has grabbed a cricket. All right, the merlin, another small falcon, a little bit bigger than a kestrel. It's a stockier bird. Again, the pointed wings here. And the main identifying feature is that this bird is streaked very heavily all over underneath. If you can see the tail, which there's just a hint of it here, a dark tail with many thin, pale bands. A bird that can be found all over the world, including, fortunately for us, the Northeast, also in Eurasia. In the winter, they can expand as far as Mexico, Central America. Typically a winter migrant here. They don't breed in the Northeast at this latitude. Perhaps, a few pairs here and there. The adult male merlin, again, everything is barred or streaked very heavily below. The adult male, can see the top of this bird is a bluish gray. All falcons typically have dark eyes, or dark brown to black. The female and the juvenile of either sex, merlin, look very similar. Again, heavily streaked here. The top is going to be a grayish brown. From a distance, merlin are incredibly fast, so you're not going to get a great look typically when they're flying past you, but if you do catch it, it's going to look very angular with the pointed wings. And again, just a blur of streaks below for a fairly small bird, and really cool to see them in flight. Very powerful and a very mean bird. They have a great temperament harassing larger birds just for fun. It seems like here's a mean looking merlin. They typically breed in the forest, but they have a pretty good diversity of habitats, including grasslands and coastal regions. A pursuit hunter, small birds are the main specialty, and they can also catch insects. Another bird that, as climate change continues, we may not see them as often, but they also may be moving into urban and suburban areas. They eat house sparrows. All right, and the larger falcon yet is the peregrine. Again, the big pointed wings, great angles on this bird. It's got a dark helmeted look. The top side has this dark gray and blue. Peregrine falcon is a widespread bird all over the globe. And around here, it's a year-round resident. You can find it in the winter or summer. The adult has some fine dark barring on the underside. So that's, again, the horizontally oriented marks. The helmeted look, the dark blue helmet. Again, the top side is dark blue-gray. There's some subtle differences between the sexes, but those are pretty hard to pick up. The juvenile looks a little bit different. The colors aren't as vivid. It's more of a brown-gray, and it has vertically oriented streaks below, so dark streaking on the juvenile peregrine. Again, dark eyes. In flight from a distance, we might just see this really sharp angular shape. Notice the pointed wings, they're very long and broad. A lot of people know that peregrine falcons are the fastest bird, therefore the fastest animal on Earth, according to experiments. So if you do catch one, just appreciate it, because the speed displays can be really impressive. And they're the fastest when they stoop, which is diving out of from a high altitude, usually at some prey. They can be found in urban and suburban areas. They do great nesting on tall buildings and structures like a tower or even a construction crane. They hunt almost entirely birds, medium and large size. And a lot of folks probably know that they almost went extinct in this area in the eastern US in the 50s to the 70s due to pollution. And then conservationists stepped in. Went mute there for a second, I'm back. Conservationists stepped in to outlaw some of those pesticides, and that really helped peregrine falcons bounce back, in addition to work introducing birds from captive stocks and releasing them into the wild. So peregrine falcons are actually doing pretty well in this region. Okay, let's talk about some other raptors that don't fit into those three buckets. The bald eagle is one that I definitely want to cover for this area. It's a huge bird, long, broad, flat wings, a large head, and a large bill. Most folks know the adult bald eagle with its black body and white head and tail extremely well, but everything but the adult eagle is a bit tougher to identify. So I want to talk about those. A bird that's widespread in the US and Canada, a year-round resident, and as I said in the beginning, more likely to be seen in the winter. The adult, almost unmistakable, with the white head, white tail, and then the long plank-like wings, almost like a flying 2x4. One thing you may not know is that it takes 5 years or more for a bald eagle to look like this. And every year before that, 5th year, they're going to look slightly different. From the age of about 2 years to the 4th year, there'll be a wide variety of different mottled plumages, a combination of black and brown and white on the body and the wings. And the tails, bills, and eyes all go from dark to eventually light. They eventually end up with a yellow bill, pale eyes, and a white tail. But in between, they can be any combination of those things. The bonus slides at the end, which again, I hope you'll check out after the presentation, have some more clues about aging bald eagles. The juvenile first-year bird's even different than that. It has a tawny or orange-brown belly, typically white in the wing pits and the underwing coverts, and a dark head, dark tail, with a bunch of mottling. And all individuals are different, so it's a very interesting bird to observe. In flight from a distance, again, big plank-like wings. The white head can be seen from an incredible distance. And then the little bit tougher for the immatures, but again, the same general shape, plank-like large wings, big, slow circles, a slow flying bird, which helps you get an appreciation for how big they actually are. And they're typically unbothered in the wind, which is pretty cool to observe. Bald eagles came off the endangered species list in 2007, so they're another great conservation story in the US. Typically, they're almost always found near water. They eat fish, large birds like ducks and geese, and they also scavenge really well. Can be very social in the winter. You might see them hanging out together. The northern harrier is a pretty unique raptor. We see them a lot in open grasslands. It's a long-winged, long-tailed bird. Every age class has some white feathers at the top of the tail, upper tail coverts, which we can just effectively call the rump. It has a white rump at any age. Widespread in North America and a year-round resident, but more likely to be seen in the winter. The adult male is a really cool bird, kind of hard to find, but it's the top side is a beautiful pale gray, below a white with different mottled streaking, bright yellow eyes, and birders nickname this bird the gray ghost. The adult female, vastly different bird, heavily streaked below on the breast and the torso, and also streaked in this patagial area. And then the flight feathers banded, a yellow eye as the adult. And then the juvenile birds, similar to the adult female, but more orange below, more unstreaked in the body and in the wings. But again, a white rump. Can't really see it too well here, but it is there. You can sex juvenile harriers by their eye color. If you can see them, the males start yellow and the females start brown. This bird looks pretty brown, so probably a juvenile female. And from a distance, the top side of the adult male, the gray ghost, see dark wingtips, the silvery gray top, white rump. Flight style, very key for this bird, low and slow. The brown type, so the females and juveniles can look very similar from a distance, streaking or orange below, low and slow, white rump as well. And again, open grasslands or coastal areas, they specialize in mammals, but will also take birds. And harriers are generally in decline due to habitat loss. Again, there's not as much open land or grassland as there used to be. We've got two species of vultures in the Northeast. The turkey vulture is the predominant one, a large raptor. The wings are held in a dihedral or a V shape at almost all the time. Widespread North and South America, and key feature, the small, unfeathered or featherless head that can be red as an adult. Flight feathers are actually silvery on turkey vultures. The rest of the body is this dark brown. Again, the head reddish as an adult, juvenile has grayish. And they can be very social. You see them in these big groups soaring together in circles. And another key is the teetering flight. They wobble back and forth. Turkey vultures are at risk from lead poisoning, believe it or not. Lead can build up in hunter leftovers from lead ammunition, and that lead can get into a turkey vulture body and kill it. Key behaviors, again, a scavenger, entirely scavengers. They don't go after live prey, although there's probably an exception out there, but for the most part, consider it a scavenger. Again, soaring, dihedral, social bird. The black vulture is another bird we're starting to see in the Northeast a little bit more. They're expanding out of the Southeast and South America, and as climate change warms up, they are feeling more and more comfortable in the North. My hometown is a place, Amsterdam, New York, which is a few hours north of the North Fork. But I've never seen a black vulture until a couple of years ago, and they're definitely expanding their area. Like a turkey vulture, mostly dark, but they have these silvery primary patches. The tail is shorter and square. At a distance, you can really see those little patches. Conservation fact, again, they're moving northward. Again, another social bird, just like turkey vultures, spend a lot of time soaring and scavenging for dead stuff. Okay, let's talk about some owls, 4 owls that we typically are going to see in the North Fork area in the winter. The first is the great horned owl. This is most people think of this as the prototypical owl shape, big body with the big ear tufts, big yellow eyes. Torso is wide and stout. The plumage is this brown mottled color makes them very hard to see. They are incredibly widespread in North America. There are some subtle differences between the sexes and also adults and juveniles. The juveniles don't have as long of a ear tuft. They take some time to grow. These birds mostly hunt mammals. Eastern screech owl, another bird that we see in the Northeast. Smaller owl, definitely has the ear tufts. Again, yellow eyes. And they come in 3 different color morphs, gray, red, or even brown. So you can see screech owls in those different coats of feathers. Widespread in the east of the Rocky Mountains, hence eastern. If you are west of the Rockies, you'll get a western screech owl. The sexes are generally identical, and it's actually not related to the plumage morphs. So you could have a male gray, a female gray, male red, female red, etc. A year-round resident that typically does not migrate. The snowy owl is a very large bird, again, well-built, stout torso, and striking all-white plumage. Depending on the age and sex, they also can have some variable black-brown barring or spotting on the front and top side. This is a bird that breeds in the Arctic and is an irregular visitor to the northern US and Canada. But during eruptive seasons, they can really widely fluctuate and can show up in large numbers in an area like Long Island. This photo is from a release of a captive wild bird that was banded at Logan Airport in Boston. They are a winter migrant, so they're really only here for the winter, and then they head back up north. And most birds that we see in our area are juvenile birds that are expanding out from their home territory where they were born. Finally, the short-eared owl is a bird that we can see in the winter in this area, a medium-sized bird with very long wings. The face is very distinct on this bird, a pale facial disc, yellow eyes, and these dark triangles behind the eyes. The plumage is almost a sandy brown and well-marked. Widespread bird all over the world, including Eurasia, and I've actually seen these birds on a trip to Hawaii, believe it or not. Subtle differences between the sexes, juveniles and adults are extremely similar. So those are the 4 regular owls, and let's talk about some rarities. The golden eagle, an infrequent visitor to the area, but certainly not impossible to see them. It's similar to a bald eagle in shape, but some key differences: a smaller head, the golden nape, the feathers in the back of the head, not seen so well here. They also have variable white mottling in the body and tail. And from a distance, again, here's a white base of the tail for this juvenile eagle and some white in the ends of the wings. They're never white in the wing pits. And here's notice the head is smaller than the bald eagle. The northern goshawk is a large accipiter that is very rarely seen outside of the forest, but should be mentioned because they're so awesome. Again, accipiter, so a long-tailed bird with blue-gray top, below very fine barring, and the extremely deep red eyes. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm getting an internet connection unstable message. Okay. And again, these images were donated to me to use in this presentation. Thank you very much. As a juvenile, similar to Cooper's hawk, but a lot of streaks below, long tail, but the wings are broader and have a different shape. So this is a great slide to study if you've got a chance. And in flight, again, long tail, broad wings. Finally, I want to talk about the gyrfalcon, the largest falcon in this area, and a very rare visitor in the winter. Another bird that breeds in the Arctic and will visit us very rarely in the Northeast. They come in white, gray, or dark morphs. The gray is the most common, and that's the bird pictured here. And at a distance, they're similar to peregrine falcons, but larger. They have more of a football-shaped torso, and their wingtips are a little bit blunter than the peregrine. So I want to hit up a few owls, and then we'll be done with the species. Long-eared owl, a bird of the forest, similar to a great horned owl, generally with the large ear tufts, but slimmer, smaller, and longer wings. These are very secretive birds, tough to see, rufous facial disc. You can find them in North America and Eurasia. And a winter migrant, so really only seen in winter in this area. The barn owl in Long Island is another possibility. Really striking bird, medium-sized owl, pale heart-shaped face, dark eyes, sandy top, pale below with these very fine specks. Another globally populous bird. Similar, subtle differences between the sexes and ages. Year-round resident. And finally, the northern saw-whet owl. This is a captive bird seen at a banding demonstration. A real small owl, notable for its large round head. Again, yellow eyes on this bird. Can be found all over the US and parts of Canada and Mexico. And another migrant. They do breed in this area to some extent, but more likely to be found in the winter. All right, that was your crash course in the species of raptors. Just some really quick points here. I do recommend some media for raptor identification. There's a few books that are key to my library, and I refer to them almost daily for beginners. And again, I think learning the basics well is a huge part of a good ID foundation. So this is one of the books I use the most, the Crossley ID Guide, a great $25 investment. They've got great photos and quizzes. If you're an intermediate raptor identifier, you need to know the Liguori books, Hawks from Every Angle and Hawks at a Distance. These will show you the reality of hawk watching and observing raptors in the environment at a distance and from any possible angle. For the advanced student of raptors, you may want to check out the new Wheeler Guide. For anybody at any age and any interest level, get the Raptor ID app. This is put out by Hawkwatch International and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It is free for your smartphone or tablet. It has 34 species, incredible photos, it has video. This is essential raptor identification equipment. I use it every day. Organizations to know, again, thank you to the North Fork Audubon Society, the regional Audubon chapter, and again, your donations are what make programming like this possible. So I appreciate anything that you can give to support this organization. And my organization, Eastern Mass Hawk Watch, a regional group of hawk watchers. You can learn about what we do at our website. I'll just name a couple others for you to check out. Cornell Lab, who runs eBird and All About Birds and other great programs. Hawkwatch International, they run the Raptor ID app and do some great field work based out of Utah. Hamana, the Hawk Migration Association in North America, they run hawkcount.org, mostly focused on migration. And that's it. Bonus slides for you to check out later are about accipiter ID, Sharpies, and Coops. Doesn't look that hard, right? These slides will help you get some fine details. So that's what I wanted to talk about in just a little bit over time, but we've got some time for questions. So hope you all enjoyed that whirlwind tour. All right. I'm gonna just start picking some questions out of the chat. Advice and strategies on how to observe owls. Great question. I think you got to be familiar with the habitat that the owls are in. Learn what type of forests that they roost in or different environments. eBird's a great resource to find hot spots where these species have been found in the past. And I think that there's no exchange, there's no replacing patience. It's going to take an investment of time to observe roosting owls because they're so secretive. They're doing everything they can to avoid being seen by us. Any guesses as to why ospreys are seldom seen out in North Fork? I've actually never been to this area, so I don't know the habitat, but yeah, ospreys are, they're looking for certain conditions to breed. They're also they breed in colonies. So it's possible that either the food availability is not as optimal. There's competition from other species like bald eagles or, peregrine falcon. There could be interference from human factors, fishing operations, busy beaches. There's different factors there. I would be just speculating without knowing the environment too well. Right. Thoughts on the snowy owl in Central Park? Super cool. Snowy owls are, again, like I was talking about, a winter migrant. So they are looking for hunting grounds to spend the winter. They're looking for safe places to avoid predators. They're looking to avoid competition from other snowy owls. So I'm sure the snowy owl flew over Central Park and said, "Oh, look, there's probably no snowy owls down there." I saw a picture of it near a baseball field, a wide open space. It's very unusual to see them in that kind of environment, but it does happen. The winter of 2013 to 2014 is probably the biggest snowy owl eruption in most of our lifetimes. And in the Boston area, I saw multiple snowy owls in the heart of Boston and on the roofs of buildings. If you've ever been to Harvard University, I saw a snowy owl on a rooftop in Harvard Square. Crazy things can happen when there are so many birds coming down from the north that they need space, they need hunting grounds, and they'll try pretty much anything. I heard you mention cemeteries earlier. Any other good places outside of parks to view raptors? Yeah, I'm glad you asked that one. It'll be hard to believe, but one of my favorite spots to bird in Boston, and folks on this presentation who know me know this is true, is the grocery store. I often bird in front of the grocery store near where I live because folks there feed pigeons, and the pigeons stay year round at the grocery store. At the beginning of the winter, there may be 250 pigeons, and then by the end of winter, there may be 75, and that's because raptors come in all day long to take pigeons. I've seen 8 different species of raptors come to the grocery store. Peregrine falcon, red-tailed hawk, and Cooper's hawk are the most common ones. But believe it or not, that's where I have my most consistent luck seeing raptors. That is the grocery store. So my lesson here would be find the prey. If you're looking to see a red-shouldered hawk, find out what they're into, reptiles and amphibians. So maybe a swamp is the right environment. If you're looking for peregrine falcon or Cooper's hawks, check the grocery store or check any place where pigeons gather. Right. Do red-tailed hawks return to the same nests each year? Great question. They can, they don't necessarily. They often will defend the same territory. And they can also build multiple nests on the same territory. So they may go from a nest on that territory one year and then the next year use the alternate nest, or they may stay in the same one over and over again. They're very picky, and it's not probably completely well known as to why they choose which nest, but it's very normal to see them switch it up. It's very normal for them to have decoy nests. Especially during spring, you may see them building. They might just do some repairs to a nest site. They may start building and change their mind. For Cooper's hawks, I've seen a male build an entire nest for weeks and have the female after that time just build their own nest and choose that one instead of the one that was completely finished. So it's not entirely known. All right, I've heard screech and great horned owls at night in winter, but not this year. Do you think they lost their nesting habitat? So good question. I think, hearing owls is definitely way more common than seeing them. And they do move around, even though I mentioned that these two species, eastern screech owl and great horned owl, are not migrants, meaning they should be in the same general area year round. They can wander. If there's competition, they can move around. And if you actually herd those two species together, make sure that you're aware that great horned owls eat screech owls. So it's possible that the great horned owl made a meal out of the screech. And that's one scenario. But, if you know that there's holes that have been used in the past by a screech owl, or, pine trees that have been used for a roost by great horned owls, just know that there's something intrinsic about that tree or environment that makes it appealing to those owls. So different individuals could come back to that same spot year after year. So that's just something to keep in mind, that there's something about that spot that is good for screech owls. So even if the same individuals are gone, a different one might come back. Let's see. Typical predators for hawks and owls are each other. So the bigger hawk can eat a smaller hawk. For nesting birds, you can see mammals like a fisher, a raccoon. I'm not sure what other martins, things like that. Tree-dwelling mammals could predate nests. Certain parts of the world, snakes or reptiles, again, could be eating eggs. And then, most likely predator for all raptors is man. Even though you'd think that hunting of birds of prey, which is federally illegal in any way in the United States, with extremely limited exceptions, you think that'd be enough to stop the shooting of birds of prey, but that happens all the time, and in New York State too, obviously. That's a factor, and that will always be the leading cause of death for raptors, whether it's directly or indirectly through development, pollution, etc. Do ospreys return to the same nest each year? Do they mate for life? I believe they mate for life. Don't quote me on that. I believe that, again, they typically will try to use the same nest, but there is less of a guarantee there, because osprey are total migrants in this area. They go to South America and the Caribbean for the winter, and then they come back. So not every bird's going to make it back. And if a bird comes back sooner than its neighbor, it may take the better spot. So there's probably some degree of competition coming back. They can't defend that nest all winter, can't defend that territory, but they are comfortable nesting in colonies fairly close to each other. So you might see that they may pick a nest close to last year's. Do all raptors have exciting mating displays? It's a good question. I don't know if all of them do. Birds like golden eagles, which don't mate around here for the most part, do some incredible aerials. Bald eagles do things like locking talons and falling to the ground. Cooper's hawks are a bird I'm pretty familiar with. They do an intricate dance where the male bows before the female to initiate mating. There's some cool stuff out there. Red-tailed hawks, again, different aerial displays. Northern harrier, similarly. I'm not so sure about owls. Short-eared owl is a bird that does a cool display called a wing clap. They clap their wings in front of their bodies in a dive. So they go up great altitude and then dive down, and they clap their wings together. If you've ever had a chance to hear that, it is really cool. Are we right in thinking that eagles sometimes kill ospreys? Absolutely. That's just the bigger bird. They're competitors fighting for the same resources, the same prey. And if you go to YouTube, type in that phrase, you will see an incredible video of a bald eagle grabbing an osprey nestling off the nest. Heartbreaking, but absolutely happens. And that may not even be for food. That may just be for competition. It may just be eliminating the competition. All right, getting close to the bottom of the list of questions. Keep them coming if you got them. All right, we're getting a donation from Lois. Thank you so much. Again, more questions about owls. I think just a key thing to think about as you're looking for owls is to keep ethics in mind. Going back to my first slide, learn about what is the risk to a roosting owl. Typically, they're nocturnal birds that are trying to avoid being seen during the day. So, we want to make sure that we're not disturbing them. We want to make sure that they're allowed to sleep and rest so they can hunt at night. So just keep that in mind, that it's a sensitive species at all times. So the search for them has got to be done carefully. Got a hand raised. let's see if I can get an audio question. Not sure how this works. All right. Any other volunteering opportunities Hawkwatch or others may need help with? Every organization needs volunteers. Find what you're passionate about. Hawkwatching is ultimately the counting of migrant raptors, and we can only do that when they're migrating in the spring and fall. So, you know, every hawk count, every hawk migration site is always looking for people to volunteer. If you've got the time, I guarantee you that someone will be interested. Wildlife rehabilitators are always looking for volunteers to help with the maintenance and feeding of injured birds of prey. That's another great resource, and you get hands-on experience, which can't be beat. And then the Audubon local chapters like North Fork have tons of opportunities for citizen science. The more bodies, the better. Do birds of prey mate for life? Generally, yes, but not completely. Interesting studies have recently been shown that like Cooper's hawks, something like up to a third of chicks that were checked in a DNA study have different DNA than their father. So extra paternal parent, I'm not sure what the right word is for that, but that happens way more than we thought. And with DNA testing getting cheaper, easier, and more reliable, we can learn things like that. So Cooper's hawks may think they're mating for life, but the reality is far different. What's your opinion on feeding birds in parks? Great question. I think that is a really interesting thing to consider, you know, the ethics of bird feeding and how that affects the environment. I'm not a regular, I don't regularly maintain a feeder, but when you're thinking about, you know, is using a bird feeder, you know, does that benefit my birds of my environment? Now you're thinking critically and you're thinking with ethics in mind. I love that train of thought, and whatever you decide, I think is right. There's plenty of evidence that feeding birds at a bird feeder is beneficial and important. But of course, you know, it can cause issues. It can spread disease. In my house, I remember at the beginning of the coronavirus lockdown, I had a bird feeder for about a week before I realized I was feeding mostly rats underneath it. So, you know, all sorts of things to keep in mind. Yeah, it can also attract raptors. That's what I was hoping for. Any other Instagrams I'm a fan of? Yeah, oh, tons. Check out my followers list on Instagram. I think that's, I really tried to, you know, there's so many great accounts out there. Like I can't think of one to name, but you can get tons of great information from different societies, organizations, wildlife rehabbers. I follow all those types of accounts. Would you consider speaking to Audubon members group in the future on Long Island? Of course. All right, we're at the end of the questions. We're a little bit over time.
Yes, well, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Brian. And again, if anybody has any questions or wants to be added to our email list, it's info@northforkaudubon.org. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good night.
All right, adios.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian, where can we find your slides?
Thank you. I think we're attempting to host them on the North Fork Audubon Society website. And I also have a copy on my personal website. So I'm just gonna browse over to the North Fork site right now and see if I can track them down for you.
There's actually, there was a link in the chat, but it is already posted under the event page for the Winter Raptor ID. It's a button that says Winter Raptor ID with Brian. Yep, that's it right there. So that's already on the page. I also posted it to our Hawkwatch as a resource since we're just getting that, you know, off the ground. that's accessible. And when we're done, we will also post the recording of this program.
Thank you so much. So yeah, northforkaudubon.org, and then you can click on about Hawkwatch, or on the events page, Raptor ID here, and it's this green button. And on my website, it's on the resources section.
Thanks so much, Brian. That
Thank
was
you.
terrific.
Awesome. I'm glad you liked it.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does your website have contact information for you?
Yeah. Yep.
Your website.
My website is my name, brianrusnica.com, RUSNICA.
And I believe your website is also posted on that same Winter Raptor ID.
Great.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Brian. We'll hopefully see you in spring.
That would be great. Have a good one.
Super. Thanks. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.